Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Um, I don't know a few of you, so if you don't know me, I'm Jan Nelson. I'm the convener of Western Methodist Justice Movement, and we're really happy to have you all here to consider justice with us. We've been in existence since, in some form or another, we've existed for a long time, and people like Frank Wolfkin and Richard Bentley can tell you about gatherings before jurisdictional conferences going way back, way back. But after the 2012 General Jurisdictional Conference, when Bishop Hagia said, well, somebody asked who was going to do all these things, and he said, go for it, do it. Take authority and get the work done. So we took that seriously and got a little more organized, and we're still a little more organized. We have some people here from our leadership team. If you're on the leadership team, would you stand up or raise your hand or both? Or and two behind me, Jean and John, are also on our leadership team. We meet monthly and try to plan things to bring people together across this little piece of geography we call the Western Jurisdiction. Occasionally we meet in person. Sometimes we meet online, as our event on Sunday night, talking about what we hope for in our new bishops. And we also try to encourage people to share ideas and share opportunities and work together across the jurisdiction, across conference lines, to better work on our mission for justice. So that's who we are, and I would just like to open with a brief prayer. So let's be in a spirit of prayer, whatever that looks and feels like for you. Thank you, God, for this time that we have to be together in person.
Recording in progress.
Sorry.
Thank you, God, for recordings. For the opportunity to share in person and online, for the amazing technology that brings us together more often than we can do in person. Thank you for the passion for justice that is reflected in so many of the people here, and for the curiosity and the hope that we bring when we meet together. Ask you to send your spirit with us today as we want to work more effectively for justice and for bringing your kingdom into the world, and specifically into our little corner of it. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. We are going to start today with a keynote speaker. Is she on yet? Yeah, there she is. Billie Fidlin is the recently retired Director of Outreach and Justice in the Desert Southwest Conference, having done that for a long time. She's a layperson. She also, among other things, has attended Claremont and studied there. She has worked on lots of justice things. Her great passion, especially right now, is at the Perryville Women's Prison, and a project that I'm sure she'll tell us about. And when we thought about somebody who could talk about having a heart for justice, those who know Billie well, she came to mind immediately. So we're going to have a time with her, including some question and answer. And so, Billie, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, and hi everybody. If you want, you could all fly down here to Phoenix. It's going to be 117 degrees today, or you can stay there. But anyway, it's great to be with all of you, and I'm just delighted to do this. So thank you for having me. 12 men. 12 men drawn together by a belief in something that they internally knew was greater than themselves. 12 men likely stepping out of their comfort zones and certainly stepping away from what was their normal everyday life. 12 men imprisoned, detained, or disdained by some or by many, and 12 men who eventually died for what they believed in. When we bombed Hiroshima, 12 American men had been held prisoner in that area, and those 12 men died. 12 courageous men, 12 men who had a cause and they believed fiercely in that cause, no matter what. 12 men who were willing to do whatever it took to make the world a better place. 12 men standing for peace, for compassion, equality, inclusion, faith, and a higher power. And this all sounds very familiar to us, doesn't it? Friends, for such a time as this, we find ourselves in the midst. Political division, church division. We've all lost people that we care about. And yet, for such a time as this, isn't it more important than ever to somehow find a way to come together, to seek unity in both mission and in justice efforts, to identify the needed causes and missions and be there? Ministries of presence, ministries of listening, ministries of action, ministries of change, because those are the ministries that will unify. I know you guys know they are distinct, this mission and justice thing. Our churches need to not only separate out those two committees, if they're together, but they also need, as leaders, we need to exemplify our support for them, our willingness to walk the journey together. Mission, see the need and fill it. Justice, see the need and eliminate it. Here's the problem, and I'm not going to tell you anything you don't already know. No matter whatever state that each of us lives in, we see housing insecurity, food insecurity, inequities in access to excellence in education and healthcare. People entering reentry from incarceration into a society that keeps them informally incarcerated in one form or another. Racism, it's either at an all-time high or people just don't care anymore. They don't want to hide it, they just don't care. Gun violence, guns seemingly the first line of defense when we're angry. Is that what the amendment was written for? People fighting for the right to use weapons meant for war in their private lives. Asking teachers to be armed, women's rights challenged or eliminated, a Mother Earth who is screaming. She's doing all she can to tell us she is displeased. Entire sectors of people brandish as not only the other, but as less than. While our denomination made great strides this past General Conference, we are but a segment. We are a small segment of a society that seems to have lost its way to come together in compassion. Oh, the things that we could address is long. The list is complicated, and at times for all of us, it's overwhelming. So for such a time as this, do we have the courage? Do we have the energy? Do we have the inspiration? Yes, for ourselves, but embracing the responsibility to provide that same courage, energy, and inspiration for other people. To give purpose that results in change is key. Whether it's providing water and heat relief locations in our churches so that people won't die as they do here in Arizona and elsewhere, or even demanding, as we did in Arizona, that an office be established at the state level to manage the annual heat crisis. Friends, we've got to give purpose that results in change in absolutely everything we do. So this is why we as people of faith, but equally important people who remember the heritage of the United Methodist Church, that we are the beacon who fights. We fight for justice. And this is why our ministries of presence, they're needed now more than ever. Our courage as people of faith is needed now more than ever. Our inner faith to give us the fortitude to stand up to those in power, and yes, I'm going to say it, whether it's a bishop, the council of bishops, a mayor or a governor, or maybe even a president, we need to come together as the church, as the local church, the conference, the jurisdiction, as ecumenical and interfaith collaborative partners. If we really did that, can you imagine what the impact would be? Now we know the 80-20 rule, it's live and well, it always has been. So the question becomes twofold. How do we undergird and love the many who have served long and well and frankly are just a little tired? And secondly, and equally important, how do we awaken the thermometer of compassion in the 80% so that they will come with us in service and love? Well, here's one answer. When I walked the desert trails years ago in the middle of what seemed like nowhere in Mexico and saw that tree, that one specific tree, there are no markers, there's no sign, but there's one specific tree on the trail, and it's laden with baby shoes and children's clothing and crosses and memories of those who have died along the journey in the desert. Well, my passion for the migrant rose. When I sat down with a father and his 3-year-old little girl, mother dead from the hands of the cartel, and I saw the scars on that baby's arms from being tortured in front of her father, my passion for asylees rose. My courage rose to stand up to the Arizona State Legislature. And if I was thrown out of committee, so be it, which I was more than once. Calling power into account is not always easy. When we honored unsheltered homeless veterans with a pinning ceremony by local military personnel for their service in Vietnam, homeless vets, my anger rose. Who are we in this country to allow veterans to become unsheltered, to deny our veterans housing? Friends, a person can be re-energized fairly quickly when someone so clearly illustrates, please help me. So my point is this: immersion experiences will awaken the sleeping giant that Christ has implanted in each one of us. Immersion experiences will give new life to the tired soul, with maybe a tiny break. But then we march on. And most important, when we come together to talk, to listen, to act, to change what we see as injustice around us, we can unify in a common purpose. And perhaps our example of unification, even when we are not all totally on the same page, well, maybe that can catch on in other places. So what's going on in your area? And what are you willing to do about it? Years ago, Bill Wilson, who inspired me to begin Sidewalk Sunday School ministry, so street ministry, in our denomination, which ultimately launched my national career, he paid me the greatest compliment at a conference he was speaking at. He said that most people have a line in the sand that sets the boundary for what they will and will not do. He said, I not only see that line in the sand, but I intentionally will cross it and go beyond each and every time. And that holds true even today. So I ask you, what line in the sand are you willing to cross so that no child, no migrant, no asylee, no veteran, no wildlife will be hurt again? Because when you can figure the answer out to that question, you have identified your passion. And if you have that passion, so does somebody else, and you can bring them along. You know, most people have heard the adage, what keeps you up at night? Well, my question to you is, what gets you up in the morning? The thing is, whatever we do in the church has to remain relevant. I remember years ago hearing Reverend Janet Wolf speak about how she and her church handled mission. And I can answer this in detail in Q&A if you guys want later on. But basically, she had developed a process where, stay with me, every single mission in the church was released at the end of the year. All of them. Didn't matter if they were income producing. Didn't matter if it was the most popular mission in the church. They were all released. And then there was a process to re-engage. And maybe they made it to the next year and maybe they didn't. And the fact is, at least when I heard her, annually, her church had some 70 mission groups. In the Desert Southwest Conference for the past number of years, what we've done is matched mission and justice involvement to the identified needs in our geographic area, Then we designed teams based on what people were interested in, along with the needs that we have faced in our daily area. So what happened from that, the main teams, economic inequality, gun violence awareness, anti-human trafficking, the environment, clergy and laity well-being, which was critically important after COVID, disabilities, specifically ramp building, asylum and refugee ministries, prison and death penalty reform. The list actually goes on, but that's the main key areas of focus. Teams were formed and opportunities were published. This translated to everything from conference-wide book studies on Zoom to spawning local church actions in any of those areas, to establishing ministries and even organizations such as the Inn in Tucson. The Inn in Tucson, that's a separate organization from the conference, but it came out of the conference, and they are for asylum seekers and all the related needs as they come into the country and then move on. We've taken tours of death row. We've written letters of influence to legislators and the governors of our conference area. We've published education pieces on the topics I've mentioned. We've held large events virtually, such as we hosted Sister Helen Prejean from Dead Man Walking as part of a series on the death penalty. We were actually a part of an interfaith effort to write legislation, state legislation, for faith community security measures. That legislation was written, it was submitted, it was passed, and it went into law last year. Now, did we have the entire constituency of the Desert Southwest Conference excited and involved in passionate response? No. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. But do we have high percentages of people involved in both mission and justice work and everything I just said? You bet we do. So a bit of mission, a bit of justice. And many times the two go hand in hand, one way or another. I want to share with you my own passion and the work that is involved with it. Again, this is an organization that essentially came out of United Methodism, of our conference. So it relates to the conference in the sense that we garner knowledge from this work, but it is separate from the conference. It is not religious in any way, shape, or form, but it feeds our prison reform and death penalty teams accurate information about what is going on in the prisons. I'm talking about Gina's team. Again, not affiliated with the church or the conference, except to feed fact-based information. Perryville Women's Prison. It's located in Arizona, just outside of Phoenix in Goodyear. It is the only dedicated women's prison in the state. It's one of 13 prison facilities that are operated by the Arizona Department of Corrections. In general, the entire campus has approximately 4,000 women that it can house. It is usually over capacity. Perryville is known as what is called a mixed security prison. So housing minimum security right on up through the most violent of female offenders. Depending on the incarcerated security level, Perryville can be a stark place, swollen with seemingly endless cement. Minimum security is less so. It has outdoor recreation areas. You can often see the incarcerated women gathered in conversation or walking the perimeter, exercising, or going back inside, behind the walls, but under the stars. Maximum security is off in the distance. And one only sees very tall buildings of cement with like these thin rectangles. I am assuming they are windows. And there's darkness there inside the building and inside the women. Depending on the desert winds, it can be dusty and blinding. It is surrounded by farmland. Wind and sand can permeate absolutely everything. The same with the constant drone of jets from Luke Air Force Base that fly overhead. The base is nearby, and the planes, they fly low and they fly loud all the time. Minimum security's bed scene is of interest. When you first arrive, you're assigned a top bunk. Later, you can earn a bottom bunk. Then you can earn a side-by-side bed or even your own area of a bed with the 400 other women that generally are in the room with you. There's no privacy. Showers are turned off at 8:30 at night. 8:30 at night, you either made it or you didn't. You have a box, maybe two, for your personal items, and you have folded clothes. Folded orange clothes. White undergarments, white socks, white tennis shoes, orange shirts, orange pants, orange sweatshirt, orange food tray, orange silverware. The reality is, in the kitchen, it's a high starch food with less than desired amounts of anything fresh or healthy. Only in the last year, we have convinced them that fresh is a good idea. Only in the last year did I complain so loudly about maggots on the trays that stopped. On one of the yards, they do have a pet. It's a pet rat. Weight gain is an issue. Health is an issue. Incarceration is an issue. How do I know all this? Because I, along with my team, teach leadership, personal responsibility, and self-discipline with Gina's team at Perryville. We teach to minimum security women, justice-impacted women, incarcerated women who really and truly are hoping for a future. They don't even get credit for time served for our class. They come because they've heard about us for 14 years and they want to be a part. They certainly receive and build personal hope. These women are my sisters in Orange, and they made a wrong turn somewhere, and they are paying a steep price for their mistake. A mistake that I tell them every week does not and must not define them for a lifetime. I share with them consistently that they must not let this time define them. It is simply a moment in time. It may be a long moment, but it is a moment in time that this too shall pass. I've been with Gina's team for around 14 years. I wrote the curriculum that we use now. I wrote it about, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago. We have them read Rising Strong by Brene Brown, and each woman is given a journal. We teach as a team 3 to 4 times a year in 6 weeks blocks, generally from 50 to, I've had as many as 100 students. In the months when my team isn't teaching with me, I go out alone. Sometimes I take guest speakers. And these are check-in sessions where I learn what's going on and what I can help address with the Department of Corrections, with the state legislature, the governor, etc. While the correction system is broken on a good day, it's paralyzed on a bad. But the fact is, we have a new director of corrections, Ryan Thornell, who is bringing about change, and he's absolutely amazing. I testified before the Senate to get him confirmed, and I believe fiercely in this man and his abilities and his leadership, and there is change. The curriculum focuses on recovering personal dignity and the leadership qualities within oneself. We begin with the chant, I am somebody. And so every beginning and every end, I am somebody, I am somebody. And it increases in volume and frequency. They have to really believe that they are somebody. We hear about it all the time in evaluations, how that means so much to them. A couple of years ago, I was honored to host Jesse Jackson, Reverend Jesse Jackson, who made this possible. This statement on Sesame Street, actually, although he did not write it, it's written by someone else. And he was so pleased. He was so happy that we were using it with the women. Because you see, they don't believe that they're somebody. Society in prison has broken their spirit, but they are promised, and that is a promise fulfilled, that they will be a different woman when they finish our class than they were the day before, the week before, the year before. Following lessons center on the importance of lifelong learning, collaboration, activism, and advocacy, making dreams your reality, where they work in teams to design their own nonprofits, which includes a mission statement, logo, and budgeting. They receive civil dialogue training. And the hardest lesson of all is the one on forgiveness. Of others, yes, but more painful and difficult, the forgiveness of oneself. And whatever it is they have done, that has not only hurt themselves, but it has immensely hurt their children and the others who love them. It's the most difficult night by far. Lots of tears as they begin the very, very long journey of forgiveness. We know their stories, and for that matter, they know ours. We have them write letters to their 15-year-old self. We learn the hard truth of these women in these letters, such as one of the women being sold by her mother at 3 years old for sex. And I wish I could tell you that's a unique story, but it's not. We are all completely honest about who we are and the journey that brought us to teach at Perryville. Generally, 100% of these women have experienced sexual abuse. Their low self-esteem led to actions that they regret. Their low self-esteem led them to be controlled by others. Most offenses are related to drug and alcohol abuse and addiction. Others are check fraud, burglary, some elder and child abuse, some weapon offenses. Their sentences are inconsistent and they're unfair. Currently, healthcare and the quality of food are at issue, as is air conditioning, which in Arizona is deadly. So we work for change. Our conference works for change. Gina's team works for change. Our Facebook page is Gina's Team-Perryville. Love to have you join it. Gina's Team-Perryville. There is an original page, Gina's Team, that somehow we can't get it shut down. So it's Gina's Team-Perryville. Please join. It's named after Gina Panetta. She was a young woman who begged for over a year to please see a nurse, to please see a doctor. She begged and she begged and she begged. And they didn't allow it. One time she couldn't get off her bunk. So they finally let her see a doctor. And at that time, she was diagnosed with stage 4 leukemia. And it was simply too late. And she died not long thereafter. Her sentence had been 2 years for writing bad checks. Her father and her daughter are a part of our team. So this is an example of one organization that was born out of what we have been taught, yes, as Christians, but also as United Methodists, to respond to those in need, to help in the immediate, and to make change for the future. So what can we do to help? What can we as the church do to prevent? What can we do to help those that have been left behind? Those are the questions for us, aren't they? Questions we have to think about carefully for impact, for guidance from victims as to how they want us to respond. What can we sustain that will truly have impact, and what can we pray about? Because in my world, with both mission and justice, while all those actions are very critical and are very important, there is nothing more important than prayer. How many of your prayers do you remember? Because Jesus remembers every single one. How hard is all of this? Well, it's hard, as you know, and it's exhausting. At times, it's overwhelming. And we need each other, friends. We need to lean on God. We need to recover all that lies within us already. We need to rise up together. Government is simply part of the answer. The faith communities, Christian as well as all God's people, in whatever form their alliance to the holy takes, all of us need to come together for such a time as this, for our call to help the other always somehow viewed as less than. But we know better, don't we? Because they are not less than, they are family. Mission can revive a church and her constituency. Mission and justice efforts can be your greatest, and yes, I'm going to say the word, evangelism tool to grow your church without ever even mentioning the word, capital W. We know only too well, mission can not only change lives, it'll save lives. And in the end, I personally cannot do one without the other. It's lovely to help, but it is equally important to fix the problems. We as the church, no question, are in the midst of our own crisis in terms of people wanting to even be a part of church. But the world around us is in crisis as well. And so are we up to the task? Will we not only see the line in the sand of accepted involvement as the church, but will we cross it for the sake of holy boldness? We as the church cannot continue. We cannot continue being fearful of what we may lose, of members we may lose. Because you guys, who will we gain? We are United Methodists, and we need to recover that sense of justice orientation. Friends, we not only should support legislation on behalf of the vulnerable, we should write it. Do we have challenges? Sure. I'm going to name a few. Compassion. I think compassion is a challenge right now. Maybe not for the people in this room or on this Zoom call, but in America today, I sometimes wonder about our level of compassion, of caring for the other. What stands between us and living out compassion? What have people become so callous about? And how can we help change this? What is more important than love? What have people stopped seeing because of their current beliefs? What have they stopped seeing because of their intentions? What have they stopped seeing because of their anger? Yeah, I think the church is needed now more than absolutely ever. Another challenge is volunteers. We need to provide opportunities that will ignite passion within people, results-oriented work, ministry that results in change. And friends, we must remember, volunteers are not paid to be in ministry with us. And so we have to respect and care for our volunteers. We have to love them and nurture them and train them and prepare them and undergird them and thank them. And thank them all the time, not just, an end of the year kind of thing. Another challenge is leadership. You got to have a plan. How do you nurture leadership? How do you help them vision for a better tomorrow? Are you setting them up for failure or success? Annual trainings are important for networking purposes, for mutual support, and for the sharing of tools, such as project management models, logic models, etc. So we need, as leadership, to provide a safe place for leaders to celebrate, but also to cry when the need at the moment overcomes the impact that sometimes happens too much of the time. Conferences leading by the scarcity principle is a dangerous behavior, and I believe it's responsible for church attendance decline, or at least it's one of the reasons. We cannot employ a full-time view of being afraid of who we're going to offend in the pew. Maybe the Sunday sermon is not the place to lift certain topics, but you know what? Maybe it is. Go into an African-American Baptist church and you'll hear justice issues all the time, every Sunday. But if it's not the sermon, then find a way. When Jesse Jackson came a couple of years ago, he looked so frail, and I had him there for a big rally. And I thought, oh my goodness, is he going to be able to talk? I mean, he was just so frail and he was quiet. And I was nervous. And the second he got on that stage, he exploded with energy and justice orientation, amazing words. If he can do it, we can do it. We might want to rethink the present ethos of being incredibly polite and proper because we are Christians. While they all know us, that we are Christians by our love, They might want to know us by our thunder. Perhaps you're familiar with the name Joe Arpaio, Sheriff Joe Arpaio. He was a sheriff here in Phoenix. He was deathly against immigration and did everything he could to be an enemy of anyone coming into this country. He would not say that. He would say he was their friend, but he was anything but. So at some point, a bunch of clergy from a variety of denominations got together and wanted to go visit him to talk about something that I'll tell you about. And they asked me to go along with them. And so we met with Joe in this big conference room. We walked in and it was just us. And then from out of nowhere, sheriffs totally surrounded us in this room. And then he came in and he sat right next to me. And so the clergy were talking with him and they were being very kind and very polite and asking questions about why is he feeling this way and why is he doing this thing? Because you see, he had these black trucks, and these black trucks, these massive black trucks had lettering on the side. And the yellow lettering said, if you see someone who you think is illegal, call this number. So they're talking to him about this. And I'm very quiet. And then at some point, the lead clergy person said to me, Billie, do you want to jump in? Because she clearly knew I was chomping at the bit. And I said, yes, I would like to. And so I started talking to Sheriff Arpaio in a rather pointed manner about the inhumanity and racist profiling that was going on because of these trucks. And at some point, he interrupted me. And he says, little lady, you're not going to change my mind. Everyone in the room knew it's probably not a good idea to call me little lady. And I looked at Sheriff Joe and I said, sir, I'm not here to change your mind. I'm here to change your heart. His response was well played. The trucks were gone the next week. Yes, speak truth to power, no matter how uncomfortable it is. Another challenge is teaching people to listen, teaching people to accept the fact that we are going to disagree. And that's kind of okay. We learn if we listen. But then how do we get beyond it? Or how do we find something that we can collaborate on? My side of the house offered civil dialogue training to our churches, which is wonderful, and more than a few engaged in that. The training emphasizes both how to listen, but also why to listen and how to respond. And we are blessed that Arizona State University offers certification in this area. So myself, along with others, taught that important skill. We also teach it, as I said earlier, at the prison. Get your bishops involved. Have as much energy in involving ecumenical and interfaith partnerships. Presence, letters, meetings. Recently, this past year, we organized a meeting of all faith, judicatory, and ecumenical leaders with the governor of the state of Arizona. And she listened and she acted on our requests, and she remains in relationship with all of them. That's huge. We have a voice and we have her ear. Legislative presence. You got to be there, friends. Be there, be vocal, be in collar if you have one. Know your statistics and let the elected know just how many people you represent in your church or in your conference, or maybe the jurisdiction, depending on who you're talking to. You and I know that's not going to exactly translate vote for vote for vote, but it'll scare them anyway. They need to know the power of the faith. We were not created to ignore the plight of those around us. Use that tugging of your heart or the experience that you have to make a difference, to make change, to rise up and say together, no more. That we will work for change because we are United Methodists. It's who we are, or at least it's who we were. That might be providing food to a food pantry or a shelter, or it might be writing an amicus brief. But friends, we work. It's what we do. Heart for mission. People ask me all the time, why do I care? Why do I continue to fight? Why do I stand up to power structures? Because sometimes it costs. And I don't necessarily have the answer. Because I was abused by a mother who chose cattle prods and horsewhips instead of something like sending me to my room? Maybe. Because I was sexually assaulted in college? Maybe. Because I watched said mother die over a period of years as I took care of her as a child, including giving her shots, to bathing her, to listening to her screams in the middle of the night? Maybe. Or maybe because I volunteered in college with Vietnam vets, but also the nurses who took care of them in Vietnam and who told me about how they would tell them, I'm going to give you a shot so that you won't feel so much pain. It'll kill the pain. And that was not the only thing that would die in the next few minutes, because for those soldiers, there was no hope. Because I know all these stories and have lived them, have I continued on? Maybe. I sort of don't have the time to answer why. It's never been easy, but it's always been a blessing. What I do know is that God has set the example for us to be a compassionate and fierce people. As United Methodists, we know to couple faith with works. It's in the Bible, yes, and it's also in our DNA as a denomination. We turn over the money changers' tables as needed, especially when we put service over being comfortable. For such a time as this, we do not have the luxury of standing on the sidelines. Too many people are hurting mentally and physically. Too many people have been misled. We need to speak truth, all truth. The message of the church should give people hope for a better tomorrow. And that's not a quick fix, but change however long it takes so that we don't repeat the same mistakes of the past. We do not have to stay in the storm, friends, so much as move through it. One of the most fascinating characteristics of buffalo, it shows us how they react when a storm is coming through. While cows, their close relatives, huddle together, and they either stay in the storm, huddled together, or they try and outrun the storm, which doesn't work. Buffalo, in all their strength and in all their might, they take the storm head on, charging directly into its path, charging directly into the storm, because by running straight through it, they minimize the time they spend in chaos and they minimize the pain they suffer. We need to follow the same instincts as the buffalo. I tell the women in prison this all the time: be the buffalo. Charge into the problem, charge into the mission, charge into the justice issue, charge into the challenge on behalf of those who need you. They need you to help them rise. And whenever possible, sooner or later, take them with you. Learn to slowly stand at the back and let their courage rise to the front when it can. What line in the sand are you willing to cross? Where will you immerse yourself to ignite your own passion and that of others? Who will you bring along with you? Do you believe that the world needs the church now more than ever? And what are you willing to do about it? Will you look deep inside for unrealized courage, energy, and inspiration? Will you choose to be the buffalo? 12 men who were willing to do whatever it took to make the world a better place. 12 men standing for peace, compassion, equality, inclusion, and faith in a higher power. Thank you, friends. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Bless you. Any questions?
Amen, sister.
Thank you.
Started with your teens.
What was the kickoff or the catalyst or?
Did you hear that, Billy?
No, I didn't. I'm sorry.
Dan asked, how did you get started with your teams? What was the kickoff, the catalyst?
For the teams? Actually, it came out of Church and Society originally, which I staffed. And we were talking about kind of this same theory about people work most effectively and will have the greatest efficacy if they work their passion. And so then we spent some time in retreat identifying what were their passions and then how did it match the passions that are the needs of the conference area. And some of them, like environment. In fact, my chair of Earth Care is actually on this call. Some of them, obviously the environment is, a national cause, but there were other things that people wanted to engage in simply because that was their thing. Prison reform would have been one of them. Gun violence, the chair that just retired from that, her brother was a policeman who was shot. So, certain things popped up that were very personal to people. And so, but it came out of Church and Society, matching passions with efforts.
I have a question. Thank you so much. I was wondering, as you identify these needs and are responding, are you also doing any kind of an asset assessment to see what are the ways in which they can also contribute their gifts and talents and resources as you minister to the prison population or to others that the migrants and others that you have mentioned?
It kind of, thank you for the question. It kind of depends on what team we're talking about. For instance, with Gina's team, we do an evaluation at the end of every single 6 weeks to find out what they're thinking. Certainly with the Inn in Tucson, which is the group that works with asylum seekers, we have statistical data that we track in terms of how many people are seen, what are the success stories, what are the medical needs and so forth, because we have to be able to prepare, because that if you find that problem, it is going to repeat itself. And so it kind of depends. The other piece that probably is harder to track is what is the efficacy. Like, for instance, the economic inequality team, they did a huge study that was then distributed by CD and documentation to the local churches. We did not get a good, even though we asked for, we did not get a good feel of how many attended, in my opinion. I don't think it was accurate at all. And that's hard on your team if they put a ton of work into something. But on the other hand, for instance, when we did the series on the death penalty and we had Sister Helen Prejean, because it was on Zoom, we did know exactly who attended. And, so it kind of just depended. Probably one of the most popular things that I did, and we did multiples of these, was the tour of the death row. And a lot of people attended those, and it was tough. Because we were in the gas chamber, we were in we were in all of it. We were in the lethal injection room and the rest of it, and we were with the prisoners. And that was we did a lot of those. And actually, until and not the director now, but the director before that put a stop to it. I think the current director will allow that again if the conference. I'm retired, so if the conference chooses, my thing is going to be Gina's team. So, but thank you for your question. It's hard. It's hard. That all tracking is hard. I'll tell you something else that was pretty popular and also drew some criticism, which is fine with me. When we did a book study, we did Prequel by Rachel Maddow. And because it wasn't a Christian author, we did draw some criticism from some of the clergy. The laity loved it, but the clergy, a lot of the clergy were like, "Oh, you didn't use a Christian author, and this isn't, Bible based, and blah 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 blah." I think Prequel and Oath and Honor by Liz Cheney they should be mandatory reading for everybody in this country before November, and that was very popular. And the groups that took part in that wanted more. So it just depends.
Izzy Almaran, Billy.
Check up here in the middle.
Talk to the Al. Yeah, so I have a question. To kind of tie up this meeting with what else is happening this week. We're electing bishops this week.
I heard that.
Yes.
I heard that rumor. That's why I'm here and not there, but
Well, what is the role of the Episcopal office in this work of justice? And if you were in the room with candidates and the delegates, which you are, some candidates are here, what questions would you ask as we discern?
Thank you, and it's good to see you. Well, first question, what is the role of bishops / judicatory leaders? In the circles that I have dealt with in Arizona, and less so in Nevada. In Nevada, their legislature only meets every other year, whatever. But it's critically important for bishops, judicatory leaders, faith leaders. I'm president of the Arizona Faith Network, which is interfaith. So I'm very interfaith oriented. It's huge to have their support, to have their presence, you know, and it's good to get letters, signatures and all that, their signatures and so forth. It's much, much better if you can get them at a rally or in the governor's office, you know, because no matter what, and clergy, you know, laity are important, clergy are important, but a bishop is a bishop. So their ministries of presence are huge. If I was in and I have been in years past, as Greg can tell you, in that room to interview Episcopal candidates, I would be asking them, number one, how do they feel about interfaith work? Because I believe the world is in such turmoil right now. It takes, oh, hi, I can see myself. It takes all of us working together. And the more the merrier kind of thing, but frankly, the more power. So I would ask them about their stance on interfaith justice work and where do they stand in terms of having staff and laity and clergy, whomever's involved, write legislation, and are they willing to back it? Because it's an expensive process to, you know, it's not just that you write it, it actually, to get something passed in legislation is fairly expensive. So I would ask them, are they willing to, you know, work with us, not only in writing legislation, but in doing and funding all that it takes to get legislation passed. And then the other question that I would ask them is, how afraid are they of being bold in the pulpit and backing their clergy 100% when a clergy decides to take a stand in the pulpit? Because that clergy needs that bishop's support, because they're going to catch fire. I mean, even if it's the most social justice, you know, church in the world, somebody's going to say something, somebody's going to write a letter, somebody's going to do something. Our clergy need backing by bishops 100%. So those would be the ones.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Billie. Kristen Stone King.
Hey, you. I thought that was you. Hi.
Good to see you. Thanks for your words and congratulations on your retirement.
Oh,
Hi.
thank you.
I'm gonna stop. My question is about Gina's team, and I know it's focused on Perryville, but is it networked with other similar kinds of teams in other prisons around the jurisdiction? And is there a possibility for that?
There is a possibility. Actually, even one of our churches up in Las Vegas has approached me about there is a women's prison up in Vegas or near Vegas, and about doing that. We are, as a team, as an organization, we are open to that. You might remember Reverend Mary Bullis. She was one of our district superintendents. She's my partner in crime. She's my co-teacher on the team and actually president of the board. I'm the lead teacher. And we're certainly open to that. However, having said that, and there's history behind this that I wouldn't necessarily articulate, but we do require that anybody that wants to, you know, explore teaching this, that they come to Phoenix and train with us. And we haven't, you know, we really, like I said, I wrote the curriculum about 2 years ago. It's going really well. The women love it, which is really all I care about. But we would do that. But right now we are not currently linked with anybody.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's, you know, by far, I always thought street ministry was going to be my legacy, my thing. It's not. It's definitely being in the prison. And, you know, the stories that we hear from these women, I mean, no one should ever question why a woman, especially in minimum security with the offenses that I noted, you should never question how they got there, because I can tell you. I mean, they are broken, they have been hurt, they have been abused, they have been controlled. They have all been raped. I've been doing this all these years. Every single class, 100% of them, 100% have been abused. And so really and truly, they've been clawing to survive. I mean, that really is what it's about. They've been clawing to survive. And then they get in there, they've lost their kids, they've lost their family. A lot of them, their kids won't speak to them. And a lot, they're in there for 10, 15 years. And you and I can have the same offense, or the same offense. I get 5 years, you get 10. Why? So that's one of the things that I'm working with Dr. Thornell and others and judges to try and get some sort of equity in sentencing. The other thing that we do, we have a group called The Village, and that's where even if they're on paper, which means they're on parole, they can at least meet with each other, meet with me. We have Criminal Justice Project present there, lawyers, people that will help them get their records erased or corrected or whatever it might be. I mean, it's a huge deal. But there's a lot of groups that do reentry. There are very few groups. There are very few groups that are in there to address the human psyche. There are a lot of religious groups in, and I have usually problems with them because the girls, I mean, a lot of them are my age, will come in and they'll say, well, I don't have to worry about anything because God will fix everything. I don't have to take classes. I don't have to do this because it's all going to be fine because God's promised. Not so much. Hi, Wendy
Thanks,
Craig. You're welcome.
Yeah, I'd like to make a quick statement about prequel. When they ask why, to me, the book Prequel is pointing out the dangers against our work on social justice, against our work on welfare and health of the people of this country. I was part of that group that organized that. And so it's very much Christ-centered, even though we don't say Christ. But those are the types of things that Christ worked for. Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy.
I'm going to ask another question. Sorry. I didn't introduce myself. So my name is Judy Chong, CalPAC, but I also work at the General Board of Global Ministries. And we have had some church and community workers, which are missionaries in the United States, do some prison ministry as well in different jurisdictions. So I think interfaith work around some of these justice issues is really important. But are there also opportunities where you're connecting with other jurisdictions to see how the similar ministries might be done and maybe, resources or best practices being shared?
But just so you know, my first thought was we are best practice. How egotistical is that? Sorry. But Greg can tell you, or Wendy can tell you who and what I am. Asking Kristen. But yes and no. I mean, do I think that the general boards could work better with the conferences? It's kind of a defined. I just retired from 25 years with the Desert Southwest Conference. And so I've worked with the general boards a lot. And it's kind of gone in and out as to the efficacy of the general boards. So right now I'm not doing anything with the general boards due to that little thing called retirement. But certainly I'm open to it. You've got my contact information in the chat, and I would be open to talking to people. I'll tell you, there's change in the wind at the Desert Southwest Conference. I'm not sure how it's going to go. And they've hired a part-time interim person to try and figure out next steps for justice and mission at the Desert Southwest Conference. And we, have Bishop Carlo, who is wonderful, is a fairly new bishop. So we've got new leadership straight down the line. So I'm not real sure how it's going to go, but I have told them that I want space. And, I'm right now, I can tell you that in terms of Gina's team, my goals are set on expansion. So I'm totally open to talking to people. But having said, one thing, when you go into a prison and you bring a program in, you get classified. We are classified as education. Like I said, we are not religious in any way, shape, or form. Now, does it come up because of who I am and who Mary Bullis is? Reverend Mary, sure. But you have to be very, very careful. And for me, right now, the women tell us all the time, we are the only class that is addressing the brokenness within them from the standpoint of recognizing it, owning it. You got yourself in here. It's time for you to get yourself out. And the classes, I mean, they'll tell you, you know, a lot of laughter and a lot of tears. You know, we have a lot of fun, but I also make them cry in a heartbeat because they need that. They need to let it go. And, you know, there's not a lot of la la land in what we do. But yet, I mean, you know, we have to close enrollment on every class because everybody wants to be in there.
So much for joining WMJM today, and I know we went back and forth about where you person, where we get a video, what it's worked out fairly well. We are going to take a short break until 3:15, and then we have a second presentation on creation care. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.